We need a new third party, a We the People's Party. We need a President of the United States that understands the Constitution, understands the Bill of Rights, and wants to give freedom back to we the people. And there is no one anywhere that I know in America that can give it back, freedom, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, than Judge Andrew Napolitano. My dear paisano, Napolitano, and I'm a Napolitano.
I did not write the introduction. Thank you, dear Gerald, my comrade in arms as we fight for freedom. What if the for Gerald. What if the Constitution is a fraud? What if the whole purpose of the Constitution is to limit the government, but in reality, it unleashes it? What if the President of the United States is supposed to be equal to the Congress, but instead he has become a democratically elected, term-limited monarch? What if the President assumes that everything he does is legal just because he's the President? What if he can interrupt your radio and television programming and your surfing on the web, your use of the internet whenever he wants without a warrant and at his whim? What if he can declare war on his own? What if he can read your emails and your texts without a search warrant? What if he can kill without a judicial order? What if Supreme Court justices interpreting the law and the Constitution don't care what the Constitution says? They only look at what their predecessors wrote. What if the rights and principles guaranteed in the Constitution have been so distorted in the past 250 years that they'd be unrecognized by the framers? What if our once revered Bill of Rights has become a bill of temporary privileges? What if the 50 states that are no longer sovereign entities equal to each other and are the parents of the federal government now are subservient to it? What if the Constitution was amended stealthily, not by the states ratifying amendments, but by Congress continuing to increase its power and the president's power, and the courts have looked the other way? What if the federal government alone decided if its power was properly exercised? What if you need a license from the government to gather and speak and be critical of it? What if the government can deny you that license if it doesn't want what you're going to say? What if federal law prohibits troops in the streets for any purpose, but nobody follows the law anymore? What if the troops and the police wear such substantially similar garb that you can't tell the cops from the troops? What if some of them wear masks so you don't know who they are? What if you're no longer secure in your persons, your body, your house, your papers, or your effects because the courts have trampled the Fourth Amendment? What if federal agents can write their own search warrants and authorize themselves to search the records that you keep and that your banker, your doctor, and your lawyer have for you? What if masked federal agents can stop you in the street and demand to see your papers? What if you don't have any papers and they can arrest you for it? What if the government can decide whether or not you get a jury trial when it accuses you of your crime? What if the government can take your property from you against your will? What if the government could continue prosecuting you after you've been acquitted until it gets the conviction it wants? What if the government can torture you until you say what it wants to hear? What if people running for president openly support the government torturing? What if the government could torture your children in your presence until you say what it wants to hear? What if government judges and lawyers intimidate juries into convicting the innocent? What if the government could send you to your death even if you are actually innocent, so long as the government can claim it follows its own procedures? What if America's prison population, the largest in the world, is a cruel and unusual way to say we are the land of the free? What if half the prison population in America never harmed anybody but themselves? What if the people have no rights except those the government lets us exercise? What if the states have no powers except those the federal government permits them to have? What if the government could strip you of all of your rights because the place where your mother was when you were born? What if the income tax is unconstitutional? What if the government tried to ban you from putting substances in your body that you voluntarily chose to use, even those substances which are older than the government itself? What if voting doesn't mean anything anymore because both parties stand for big government? What if we have only one uniparty with a Democratic wing and a Republican wing? What if wars rage and presidents kill and debt increases and regulations expand and liberty shrinks no matter which party controls the Congress or occupies the White House? What if the government can write any law and regulate any behavior and tax any event and the courts will let them do it? What if government doesn't create wealth? It seizes it. What if government doesn't build? It destroys. What if government transactions aren't voluntary? They're compulsory. What if everything the government says is a lie? What if everything the government has, it is stolen? What if government at its core is the negation of liberty? What if you can love your country but hate what the government has done to it? What if war doesn't bring peace, it brings destruction? What if spreading democracy abroad doesn't spread truth, it spreads violence? What if searching for monsters to slay abroad inevitably brings them home? What if American taxpayers have paid for every bullet that has entered the brain of every Palestinian baby that the IDF has slaughtered? What if a government that tolerates that should be altered or abolished? What if the government doesn't care so long as its financial backers are pleased? What if Jefferson was right? What if that government is best which governs least? What if I'm right? What if the government is wrong? What if it's dangerous to be right when the government is wrong? What if our greatest danger to American liberty is right now? I've been giving these talks for 40 or 45 years. And one of these days I will stop. And when I do and leave this veil of tears, I hope that I am in my own bed, in my own house, surrounded by those who love me, faithful to first principles. But not everyone, particularly the young people here, will have that luxury. Some of you will die faithful to first principles in a government prison. Some of you will not have the liberty of dying in your own bed. You will die faithful to first principles in a government prison. And some of you will die faithful to first principles in a government town square to the sound of trumpets blaring. When it comes time to make those awful choices, you'll know what to do. Because freedom lies in the human heart. And the human heart, as long as it's there, no government, no majority, no ideology is going to take it away. But the human heart is a muscle. And like all muscles, it needs to be exercised. So freedom must do more than just lie there. Thank you, and God love you.